Before we dive in, viewer discretion is advised. This content is for entertainment. What happens when one of Hollywood's most accomplished actresses, a woman who's built a career spanning 2 decades of critically acclaimed performances, box office dominance, and genuine artistic courage, walks onto a talk show expecting professional discourse, only to discover the host has prepared an ambush disguised as journalism? When someone who's proven her talent thousands of times over encounters a host who's decided that success equals guilt, that privilege negates achievement, that every career choice must be justified as someone who's never created anything comparable. When a promotional interview becomes a public trial, where the verdict was decided before any evidence was presented, where the sentence is humiliation regardless of defense, where the judge is someone who appointed herself to that role, without earning the authority. What you're about to witness is not just another celebrity interview gone wrong, not just another moment of talk show tension spiraling out of control, not just another instance where egos collided and professionalism collapsed. This is the moment Scarlett Johansson, an actress who's navigated Hollywood's complexities with intelligence and integrity, who's made choices that some question but which she could defend with substance rather than just excuses, who's used her platform to amplify important conversations while refusing to be reduced to anyone's convenient symbol, discovered that some hosts don't want dialogue, they want confession, and when they don't get it, they'll use their power to silence you. The View had pursued Scarlett for her upcoming thriller, knowing that booking her would guarantee ratings and attention. At 39 years old, she was at the peak of her career. Critical acclaim from dramatic roles, commercial success from franchise work, producing credits that showed she understood the business beyond just acting, and enough longevity to prove she wasn't just another flash-in-the-pan star, but a genuine artist who'd earned her place. Her publicist had negotiated the appearance with the usual stipulations that any major star requires focus on the film. Keep questions respectful and relevant. Avoid ambush tactics about controversial topics without prior discussion. Standard protocol for someone of Scarlett's caliber. Someone whose time was valuable and whose participation in promotional tours was a calculated strategic choice rather than desperate need for exposure. The producers had agreed completely, assuring everyone they understood this was a promotional interview celebrating an acclaimed actress and her new project. They knew what Scarlett represented. Not just box office draw, but genuine talent. Not just celebrity, but substantive achievement. Not just fame, but the kind of respect that comes from decades of excellent work. But Joy Behar had spent the morning preparing something entirely different. She decided that Scarlett's career choices, roles she'd taken that some activists had criticized, decisions she'd made that certain communities had questioned, successes she'd achieved in industry where representation remained contentious, need be addressed, not discussed, not explored in good faith, but addressed in the sense of prosecution, confrontation, public reckoning, what Joy called holding people accountable. Scarlett would soon recognize as the same performative activism that cares more about the act of calling out than about actual change, more about appearing righteous than about being constructive, more about public shaming than about meaningful dialogue. What Joy fundamentally failed to understand, what people who've never created art or built careers could never grasp, was that Scarlett Johansson had become one of the most successful actresses of her generation by being cavalier about her choices. Every role involved consideration. Every project required thought. Every decision balanced artistic merit against social responsibility in ways that Joy, who'd never had to make such choices, could never appreciate. This isn't about whether celebrities should face criticism, whether successful people should justify their choices, whether representation in Hollywood demands scrutiny. This is about the difference between criticism seeking understanding and criticism seeking destruction, between accountability that builds and accountability that simply tears down, between dialogue that might actually change things in performance that just makes the performer feel superior. Joy Behar thought she was doing brave activism confronting privilege, demanding answers, speaking for marginalized communities who couldn't speak for themselves, though no one had asked her to. What she was actually doing was demonstrating that some people use social justice language as a weapon for personal advertisement, that moral authority can be claimed without being earned, and that platforms can be abused by those who've never faced the complexities they so confidently judge. And when Scarlett Johansson, who'd spent 2 decades navigating impossible situations with grace, who thought deeply about representation, while Joy was still making cheap jokes, who'd actually use her privilege to create opportunities rather than just lecture about them, finally had enough of being prosecuted by someone unqualified to judge. What erupted was one of the most devastating confrontations in television history. Buckle up, because what you're about to witness isn't just an explosive clash. It's a moment when someone who'd been ambushed, attacked, and then ordered removed from a set for defending herself demonstrated that grace under pressure doesn't mean accepting abuse. That politeness has limits, and that sometimes the most powerful response is refusing to play a rigged game. The View studio buzzed with familiar energy that morning. Audience members settling in with particular excitement given the day's guest. Scarlett Johansson didn't do many daytime talk show appearances. She didn't need to, and at her level of success, every media choice was strategic rather than necessary. As she arrived and moved through the pre-show preparations, everything seemed normal. Makeup touch-ups, microphone checks, brief pleasantries with production staff. Her publicist went over the agreed-upon topics one more time. The new film, working with a director, what drew her to the project. Standard promotional interview territory, but observant staff members might have noticed something unusual. Joy Behar sitting at the host table going through note cards with unusual intensity, occasionally glancing at Scarlett with an expression that veteran crew members recognized as problematic. Whoopi Goldberg, Sarah Haynes, and Sonny Holland chatted casually nearby, but Joy remained focused on her papers with the concentration of someone preparing for combat rather than conversation. The show's theme music began, the familiar opening playing out as cameras swept across the audience. Whoopi delivered the standard welcome, introducing topics and guests with her characteristic warmth. When Scarlett's name was mentioned, the audience applauded enthusiastically, their genuine excitement palpable. "We're thrilled to have Scarlett Johansson with us today," Whoopi said, gesturing toward their guests with obvious respect. "She's here to talk about her new thriller, which is getting incredible early buzz." Scarlett smiled graciously, settling into the guest chair with practiced ease. "Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to discuss the film. It's a project I'm genuinely proud of." "Well," Joy interjected, and her voice cut through the pleasant atmosphere like a blade, "I'm sure our audience would love to know about more than just your movie. There are some questions that have been floating around about your recent career choices that I think deserve answers." The temperature in the studio dropped perceptibly. Scarlett's publicist, standing just off camera, shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't part of the agreed-upon interview topics. Wasn't what had been negotiated. "I'm sorry," Scarlett said, maintaining her composure, but with confusion evident. "What specific questions are you referring to?" Joy leaned forward, eyes gleaming with the anticipation of someone about to spring a carefully prepared trap. "Well, let's start with the elephant in the room. Your decision to take on certain roles that many people feel you had no business playing. Don't you think there's a pattern here of you inserting yourself into stories that aren't yours to tell?" The other hosts exchanged glances that made clear this deviation from the planned interview surprised them as much as it did Scarlett. Sonny looked particularly uncomfortable, while Sarah seemed to be trying to catch Joey's attention to redirect. Scarlett took a deep breath, her media training kicking in, even as she processed this unexpected ambush. "I think every actor considers the roles they take very carefully. I've always tried to approach my work with respect and authenticity, and I've engaged in meaningful conversations about representation." "Respect and authenticity," Joy interrupted, her tone dripping with skepticism. "That's interesting, because from where I'm sitting, it looks more like opportunism. Taking roles that could have gone to actors who actually share the background of the characters you're portraying." "Joy," Whoopi tried to interject, clearly sensing the interview was veering into dangerous territory. "Maybe we should know—" "Whoopi!" Joy cut her off sharply, not even looking at her colleague. "This is exactly the kind of conversation we should be having. We talk about representation and diversity all the time on this show, but when we have someone sitting right here who's part of the problem, we're just going to pretend everything's fine." Scarlett's jaw tightened slightly, but her voice remained steady. 20 years of navigating impossible media situations was evident in her controlled response. "I understand that representation is important, and it's a conversation absolutely worth having. But I don't think ambushing someone during what was supposed to be a promotional interview is the right way to have it. Ambushing. Joy laughed. But there was no humor in it, only contempt. This is journalism, sweetheart. If you can't handle tough questions, maybe you shouldn't be sitting in that chair. The condescending sweetheart hung in the air like a slap, and Scarlett's eyes flashed with the first real sign of anger breaking through her professional composure. I can handle tough questions just fine, she replied, her voice cooler now. What I have a problem with is being lectured by someone who clearly came into this conversation with an agenda rather than any genuine interest in dialogue. An agenda? Joey's voice rose slightly, defensiveness creeping in even as she maintained her aggressive stance. My agenda is holding people accountable. My agenda is asking the questions that matter instead of just lobbing softball questions about your latest movie. Then ask me real questions. Scarlett shot back, leaning forward slightly, her control beginning to slip. Ask me about the craft. Ask me about the industry. Ask me about the actual work. But don't sit there and pretend this is some noble pursuit of truth when what you're really doing is trying to create a viral moment for your show. The studio audience had gone completely silent, the comfortable atmosphere of daytime television having evaporated entirely. Even camera operators seemed frozen, unsure whether they should keep rolling or cut away from what was rapidly becoming a genuine confrontation rather than controlled television. Joey's face flushed red, clearly not expecting such direct pushback from someone she presumably thought would be easier to intimidate. "Excuse me," she said, her voice reaching a pitch that made several audience members visibly cringe. "Did you just accuse me of exploiting the situation for ratings? I'm saying that if you wanted to have a serious conversation about representation in Hollywood, you would have told me that's what we were doing before the cameras started rolling." Scarlett replied firmly, her voice carrying authority earned through 2 decades of handling situations far more complex than this. "Instead, you ambush me on live television, which tells me this is more about the spectacle than the substance." Sarah tried desperately to redirect the conversation towards safer ground. "Maybe we can talk about how the industry has evolved, how these conversations are." "No," Joy interrupted again, now fully committed to the confrontation she'd engineered. "I want to hear Scarlett explain why she thinks she can just take any role she wants without considering the impact on marginalized communities." Scarlett stared at Joy for a long moment before responding, and when she spoke, her voice carried the weight of someone who'd thought deeply about these issues, while Joy was still figuring out how to weaponize them. "I think you're making a lot of assumptions about my decision-making process and my values based on incomplete information and a predetermined narrative." "Incomplete information?" Joy scoffed, waving her hand dismissively. "The information is your filmography. The information is a pattern of choices you've made throughout your career, and you've appointed yourself the judge of those choices." Scarlett replied quietly, but the quiet carried more power than shouting. "Someone has to be..." Joy shot back, and the words hung in the air like a confession of exactly what this was about. Not journalism, not activism, but ego. The other hosts looked mortified. The audience squirmed in their seats. Somewhere in the control room, producers were probably having heart attacks. But neither Scarlett nor Joy seemed willing to back down from the confrontation that had completely overtaken what was supposed to be a pleasant promotional interview. The silence following Joey's declaration was deafening, charged with the kind of tension that makes everyone aware they're witnessing something significant. Scarlett's eyes narrowed as she processed what had just been revealed so nakedly. "So, you appointed yourself the judge of my choices?" Scarlett said slowly, each word deliberate and cutting. "Tell me, Joy, what qualifies you to make those judgments? What's your background in acting? What roles have you turned down for the sake of representation? What meaningful work have you done in this area beyond sitting behind a desk and passing judgment?" Joey's face went from red to purple, the flush of someone whose authority has been questioned in a way they can't answer. "I don't need to be an actor to recognize problematic behavior when I see it." "Problematic behavior," Scarlett repeated, leaning back in her chair with a look that could have melted steel. "You know what I find problematic, Joy? A talk show host who thinks she can publicly shame a guest without having done even basic research into their actual positions, their actual work, They're actual charitable efforts regarding the very issues you're pretending to champion. This isn't about your charity work. Joy snapped, clearly wanting to maintain control of the narrative she'd constructed. Isn't it? Scarlett's voice rose for the first time, genuine anger breaking through. Because if you had done your homework, if you actually cared about the issues you're pretending to champion, you would know that I spent years supporting organizations that promote diversity in film. You would know that I've used my platform to amplify marginalized voices. You would know that I've turned down roles specifically because I felt they should go to other actors. Joy opened her mouth to respond. But Scarlett wasn't finished 2 decades of being professional, of taking criticism gracefully, of trying to do the right thing. While people who'd never faced such choices judged from the sidelines, it was all pouring out now. But you don't know any of that, do you? Because this isn't about education or progress or meaningful dialogue. This is about you needing to feel morally superior to someone. And you picked me as your target today because you thought I'd be an easy mark. How dare you? Joy said, her voice shaking with rage. How dare you come on my show and lecture me about moral superiority when you're the one who your show? Scarlett interrupted, looking around at the other hosts with theatrical disbelief. I'm sorry. I thought this was a View, not the Joy Behar show. Are Whoopi, Sarah, and Sunny just decorations, or do they get to participate in this ambush too? Whoopi cleared her throat, clearly trying to regain some semblance of control over the situation that had spiraled completely out of hand. Let's all take a breath here. No, Whoopi. Joy cut her off with such vehemence that Whoopi actually recoiled. I'm not going to sit here and let this privileged actress turn herself into the victim. Privileged? Scarlett said with a bitter laugh that echoed through the studio. There it is. The magic word that's supposed to end all discussion. That's supposed to invalidate anything I say. Yes, Joy, I'm privileged. I'm successful. I'm well paid. I have opportunities that many people don't have. But that doesn't mean I forfeit my right to be treated with basic respect. And it certainly doesn't give you the right to attack my character based on your own assumptions and incomplete understanding. Joy stood up now, her voice reaching levels that had audience members literally covering their ears. I'm asking you to take responsibility for your actions, and I'm telling you that your approach is counterproductive and hostile, Scarlett replied, also rising from her chair, matching Joey's energy with controlled fury. If you want to have a conversation about representation, then have it. But don't pretend this is anything other than a performance designed to make you look good at my expense. Production assistants were frantically gesturing to the control room. Several audience members had their phones out, clearly recording what was becoming one of the most explosive moments in daytime television history. The other hosts looked like they wanted to disappear entirely. You want to talk about performance? Joey's voice cracked slightly. Emotion overwhelming. Even her considerable practice at manufactured outrage. Your whole career is a performance. Playing characters that aren't yours, telling stories that aren't yours, and then acting surprised when people call you out on it. Scarlett stepped closer to the host table, her composure showing real cracks now as 20 years of dealing with this particular brand of reductive criticism finally overwhelmed her patience. You know what, Joy? You're right about one thing. I am performing right now. I'm performing civility in the face of someone who invited me here under false pretenses, so she could publicly humiliate me. I'm performing patience with someone who clearly has no interest in an actual conversation. False pretenses. Joy shrieked, her voice climbing to registers that made several people wheeze. Everything I'm saying is legitimate criticism. Legitimate criticism would involve asking questions and listening to answers. Scarlett shot back, her voice cutting through Joey's hysteria with precision. What you're doing is making accusations and then getting angry when I don't immediately confess to whatever sins you decided I've committed. Sarah tried one more desperate time to salvage something from this catastrophe. Maybe we should move on to talking about Scarlett's new film. We're not moving on to anything, Joy declared, pointing a finger at Scarlett with theatrical intensity. Not until she acknowledges the harm she's caused. The harm I've caused? Scarlett's voice was incredulous, carrying genuine confusion alongside anger. Joy, do you hear yourself? You're talking about harm while you're literally trying to destroy someone's reputation on live television based on your own personal grievances, and need to feel important. Personal grievances. Joy was practically screaming now, completely losing whatever composure she'd maintained. This isn't personal. This is about justice. Justice? Scarlett laughed, but there was no humor in it, only exhaustion and disbelief. You want to talk about justice? Let's talk about the justice of ambushing someone who came here in good faith. Let's talk about the justice of using your platform to bully someone, instead of having a meaningful conversation about the issues you claim to care about. Let's talk about the justice of attacking someone for not immediately capitulating to your worldview. Joy slammed her hand down on the table so hard that Sarah's coffee cup jumped, liquid sloshing dangerously close to the edge. Don't you dare call me a bully. Then don't act like one, Scarlett replied without missing a beat, her voice steady and firm. The words hit Joy like a physical blow. For a moment, she was completely speechless, her mouth opening and closing as she searched for a response that wouldn't prove Scarlett's point. When she finally found her voice again, it was barely controlled rage, overlaying something that might have been shame. Get her out of here, Joy said to production staff, her voice low and dangerous. Get her out of here right now. Excuse me. Scarlett turned to look at Joy fully, genuine shock breaking through her anger. You're having me removed because I won't agree with your assessment of my character. I'm having you removed because you're disrespectful and you refuse to take accountability, Joy replied, but her voice lacked conviction now, the hollowness of her justification evident even to her. Scarlett stared at Joy for a long moment, then looked at each of the other hosts in turn. Whoopi looked mortified. Sarah looked like she might cry. Sunny was staring at her hands, unable to meet anyone's eyes. This is unbelievable, Scarlett said, her voice now quiet, but carrying clearly throughout the studio. You invite someone onto your show, attack them personally, refuse to listen to their responses, and then have them removed when they don't capitulate to your demands. This is exactly the kind of abuse of power you claim to oppose. Security, Joy called out, not taking her eyes off Scarlett, clearly committed to this course of action, despite how badly it reflected on her. 2 security guards appeared at the edge of the set, looking deeply uncomfortable with the situation they'd been called into, clearly aware that removing Scarlett Johansson for defending herself against an unprovoked attack was not what they'd signed up for. The audience was now openly murmuring, some people standing up to get a better view of what was unfolding, others shaking their heads in disbelief at what they were witnessing. Scarlett looked at the security guards, then back at Joy, and when she spoke, her voice carried disappointment alongside anger. This is who you really are, isn't it? When you can't win an argument with words, when someone actually fights back against your attacks, you just use your power to silence them. Get her out, Joy repeated, her voice shaking, perhaps with anger, perhaps with a recognition that she created a situation she couldn't control. Scarlett gathered her purse and stood up straight, her dignity intact. Despite everything that had just happened, despite being literally ordered off a set for the crime of defending herself, I don't need security to escort me out. I can walk out on my own. She turned to face the audience, many of whom were now standing, some of whom had started applauding her stand against this travesty of journalism. Thank you all for witnessing this, she said clearly, her voice carrying to every corner of the studio. Remember what you saw here today. Remember that this is what happens when someone challenges manufactured outrage with substance. As Scarlett walked toward the exit, Joy apparently couldn't help herself. Couldn't let Scarlett have the last word or the moral victory. That's right. Walk away just like you always do when someone calls you out. Scarlett stopped dead in her tracks. The entire studio seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see if she would respond, if she would give Joy the confrontation she so desperately seemed to need. Scarlett turned around slowly, and when she faced Joy again, there was something different in her expression. The professional mask completely gone, replaced by something raw and honest that made even the security guards take an unconscious step back. Walk away like I always do. Scarlett's voice was quiet, but it carried to every corner of the studio with devastating clarity. Joy, I've been sitting here for 15 minutes trying to have a civil conversation with you while you've done nothing but attack me. I've answered your questions. I've defended my positions. I've tried to treat you with respect despite the fact that you've shown me none. Joy crossed her arms, clearly thinking she regained the upper hand by provoking this response. And now you're running away instead of facing the truth. The truth? Scarlett walked back toward the set, her heels clicking on the studio floor with measured precision. You want to talk about truth? Let's talk about the truth of what just happened here. The audience was completely silent now, hanging on every word, recognizing they were witnessing something unprecedented. Even the camera operators seemed frozen in place, unsure whether to keep filming or look away. The truth is that you invited me here under the pretense of promoting my film, then ambushed me with accusations that you never intended to discuss in good faith. Scarlett continued, her voice gaining strength with each word. The truth is that when I didn't immediately agree with your characterization of my career, you became hostile and abusive. The truth is that you interrupted your own co-hosts multiple times when they tried to steer this conversation in a more productive direction. She gestured to Whoopi, Sarah, and Sunny, giving voice to what they clearly felt but couldn't say. You called me sweetheart in a condescending tone. You refused to listen to anything I said that didn't confirm your preconceived notions about who I am and what I represent. And now you're having me removed by security because I won't accept your judgment as final and absolute. Joy's face was flushed again, but this time it seemed more from embarrassment than anger, the reality of her actions perhaps finally penetrating through her righteous certainty. I was trying to hold you accountable, Joy said, but her voice lacked the conviction it had carried earlier. No, Joy, you were trying to humiliate me, Scarlett replied firmly, her words landing with the weight of undeniable truth. There's a difference between accountability and public shaming, between criticism seeking understanding and criticism seeking destruction. What you did here today was the latter, and everyone watching knows it. Whoopi finally found her voice, perhaps recognizing that this needed to end before it got even worse. Scarlett, maybe we can start over. Have a real conversation. Whoopi, with all due respect, there's no starting over from this, Scarlett said, turning to address her directly with genuine sadness. Your co-host just called security to have me removed because I wouldn't accept her assessment of my character. That's not journalism. That's not activism. That's just abuse of power. And everyone in the studio knows it. The words hung in the air, undeniable and devastating. Scarlett had just articulated what everyone was thinking, but what the other hosts couldn't say without creating even more conflict with their colleague. With that, Scarlett walked off the set for the second time, and this time, Joy remained silent, perhaps finally recognizing that anything she said would only make things worse. As Scarlett disappeared from view, the audience burst into sustained applause. Not just scattered support, but overwhelming approval for how she'd handled an impossible situation. With grace under impossible pressure, the three remaining hosts sat in stunned silence, the weight of what just happened settling over them. The cameras kept rolling for a few more seconds before finally cutting to commercial, but the damage was done. The most explosive confrontation in daytime television history was complete, and it had revealed exactly who Joy Behar was when someone refused to accept her judgment as absolute authority.